everybody. Welcome back. Adela, it's got to be, what, 5 years since you last came to my house? I am going to show you today how to make a really quick and simple lunch dish called Spanish eggs. Lots of gorgeous flavours. It's based on a recipe I had for the first time when Ollie and I were on holiday in Spain, just outside Santander. And it was absolutely delicious. And the original recipe takes forever. So this is my quick version of Spanish eggs that you can knock up in less than 20 minutes. So the first thing I'm going to do is to put my pan on the stove. That needs to start warming through. And the second thing I'm going to do is start to chop half an onion. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the variations that you could have with this recipe if you wanted. The one I'm making today is vegetarian. So, no, it isn't, fib. The one I'm making today has got chorizo in it, but you can make it without that, in which case it would indeed be vegetarian. And if you were to use dairy alternatives, I'm going to fry this in a little bit of butter, then it could also potentially be vegan, which is really exciting. So all I'm doing here is chopping half an onion into small dice, or as small as I can manage when I'm talking at the same time. And then I'm going to get a little knob of butter. Somebody out there's got their not muted, because I'm getting a bit of feedback, if you don't mind just checking. Because somebody's singing at me in my ear. So I've just put a little bit of butter in the bottom of the pan. I'm going to add the onions in first of all. This is a non-stick pan. And then as they start to soften, I'm going to do the next bit, which is to get the spatula. I forgot to get. Right, 1 second. There we go. Spatula, give that a little stir around in the oil. Now, here's a little top tip if you're going to use butter to soften some onions, is that a little drop of oil in with the butter will stop your butter from burning. So you are able then to leave it without having to hover all over it. That's going to take a couple of moments just to soften. And whilst it does, what I'm going to do is to add some garlic. Now, you can crush cloves of garlic if you want. That's absolutely not a problem at all. Obviously, if you're one of the Thermomix cult, you just do whatever it, tell the Thermomix the spell it needs to do the garlicky thing. I don't. But instead of using a garlic crusher, what I'm going to do is to use a mini grater. It's easier, basically, to clean afterwards. And I've got 2 cloves of garlic here. So I'm just going to grate those in. And this pan is on a lowish heat. The eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that this is not the cooker I've used in the summertime. This is indeed our Aga, which I love to death. It does take a certain amount of getting used to cooking on the Aga, because you can't control any temperatures. So there may be a certain amount of pan fandango going on if I need to swap it onto a higher heat or a lower heat, and back to a higher heat or a lower heat. It's all part of the fun. So there we go, 2 cloves of grated garlic straight into the pan. Just pop that on the side and I'll give that a little stir around whilst that's softening up. Now, when I originally had this dish and I asked the people at the posada we were staying at how to make it, it took her hours and hours and hours to stew down red peppers, tomatoes. I don't have hours. I've got about 17 minutes. So I'm cheating. And I'm cheating with some readily available ingredients that you cook from frozen. Yes, that's right. You cook from frozen. Thermomixers, just go with it. So what I've got here is some diced frozen chorizo. If you're not in a hurry, do to make the effort to buy a proper chorizo ring and cut it into slices. You get more oil out of it that way. But this is speedy lunch recipe. So here we go. What I've got here is around about 100 grams of chorizo. That's going to go in the pan. And again, I'm going to give that a little stir. One of the advantages of using the frozen chorizo is it is already releasing the oil into the pan. It's already starting to give me that lovely orangey oil, and I can already start to smell that lovely paprika spice. If you don't want to use chorizo, then you can just add paprika. Do you use the sweet stuff? The smoked sweet stuff is quite nice if you're not a fan of heat, or if you really want to go for it, try the picante and add a good amount, and you'll get a nice little spicy kick on the back of that as well. So I'm just waiting for that to start fizzing. You can hear it behind me. And then this is the second cheat. Is The actual recipe that I had, as I say, she took hours to stew down peppers. So what I've actually done here is to use some frozen sliced peppers. I can cook those immediately straight out of the freezer. That's what I just dashed to the fridge for just before we started. And I'm going to put those straight in. There's about, excuse me, got the hiccups, there's about 200 grams of frozen sliced peppers. So I'm going to give that a good old stir round. And I'm just going to pop the lid on very quickly whilst it has a little think about it. So at this point, I'm then thinking about getting together the rest of the ingredients to make this dish. What we're going to do is to add a rich tomato sauce to it. Now, again, I could spend hours making a rich tomato sauce from scratch, but I'm not. What I'm going to do is to use a tin of chopped tomatoes, and I'm also going to use a jar of mild salsa. That's going to give me some of that sort of spice that I'm looking for without me having to go ahead and create it from scratch. This is all about doing it quickly, and that's what exactly what I'm wanting to do. And as I suspected, it is now time to do a pan fandango. So for just 1 second, I'm going to go one plate to the left. Sing amongst yourselves the old Time Warp song. Hold on a minute. To get a bit of heat in the bottom of that pan. I'll come back to it in a second. And again, it depends on how hot and spicy you like things. You can use a hot salsa, you can use a mild salsa, you can use the fresh stuff that you get in pots, you know, when you go to get your dips and things like that from the supermarket. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's something that you're going to enjoy. So I can hear now that that pan, having moved on to the hot plate, is now coming up to temperature. There we go. So now it is up to temperature. Here's the fun of Arga cooking. Back onto the lower heat, and I'm going to add the liquid. Now, the reason I'm doing that on my Arga here as well is, believe you me, when it's not freezing, standing in front of the Arga and cooking is quite a hot experience. And when you've got the hot plate on, it's a little sauna going on. So I've just added, there we go, the tin of chopped tomatoes. In goes the salsa. I wish you had smelly vision because this just smells amazing. And then I'm going to give that another stir. Round it goes. Just to make sure that's all incorporated in. And then it's going back on the heat. So if you were doing this on a gas or an induction cooker, you're just turning the heat on and off. You're not having to do the Arga fandango that I am. And that's now just going to wait for that to come back up to the heat as I am listening for that bubble. Would help if I put the lid back on. Hang on a minute. There we go. Lid back on. There we go. So what's happened so far is I've diced half an onion, grated in 2 cloves of garlic, added then the frozen Spanish chorizo. Again, if you've got more time, please do go and look for the proper stuff and chop it up. You get much more oil out of it, which is what you're looking for. And again, if you had more time, you could roast the peppers, low and slow rather than hard and fast. About 6 hours in the oven. Peel off the skins, slice them up. They're absolutely divine, but as I say, it takes forever. So I'm just waiting for that to come up to the bubble. And then what I did was to add a tin of chopped tomatoes and a jar of salsa. Again, this is all about speed. What you notice I didn't do was add any more liquid. What I don't want is for this to become almost like a soup. What I really want is for this to be quite a thick sauce, because in a few moments' time, I'm going to break some eggs into it and put those on the top. Hence the Spanish eggs reference. So I'm going to move this back. There we go. Whip off the lid. It's bubbling away, which is good. There we go. So again, remembering, Sheena, that this is hot, I'm going to give that a stir just to make sure that it's all incorporated. There we go. Then I'm just going to use back of the spoon to see if it needs any seasoning, which it does. So I'm just going to add a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper, and I'm going to give that another stir. There we go. Right. Now, lid on time again, whilst I just get the eggs ready. Now, I'm really lucky actually, because my good friends Nick and Katie, who live just down the road, have a small holding, and these are their eggs from the farm that they dropped off yesterday. So I'm really quite excited, and also equally a little bit nervous that there might not be a baby chicken in one of these, but we'll find out in a minute. So what I've done here is to go ahead and get four eggs so that we're ready to go. Obviously, what I'm cooking here is something that would serve 2 very hungry people or 4 people for a light lunch. So I'm just, again, waiting to hear the pan start to bubble a little bit, which is just about getting there. There it goes. And then I'm going to take the lid off again. Here we go. So it's just bubbling gently. In fact, I'm just going to pop that there for a second. It's just bubbling gently, which is what I want. What I don't want is for this to be at a fast boil. Otherwise, all you're going to get is the white of the eggs will set before the yolk cooks through. And what I'm looking for is a gentler heat so that I get a more even cooking. I'm looking hopefully for a little bit of, runny egg at the top, but what I don't want to end up with is set white on the bottom and raw white on the top, because let's face it, that's just not pleasant. So I'm just going to give that another little stir, and then I am going to break the eggs into the pan. So fingers crossed. There we go, number 1. Gardeners amongst you, don't throw those eggshells away. Wash them, dry them, crush them. Slugs hate them. A little tip there. There we go. So in goes number 3. Golly, these eggs look amazing. And last but not least, number 4. So that's the 4 eggs in. They're just starting to come up to the bubble, which I can see there. And this is also where the speed element comes in. If I left the lid off now, I'd be waiting for about 12 to 15 minutes for these eggs to start to cook. But if I use the lid from the pan, by creating that bit of sealed heat, it's going to cook that much faster. So whilst those are cooking, I need something to go with this. So what I'm going to do is to take a couple of pieces. I'm quite proud of this, so I am going to have a show-off moment of my homemade sourdough. Check that out, which I made on Wednesday. And I'm going to pop those. This is what it's like when you have an Arga, okay? Because it's on all the time, and I'm married to a man who goes around the house switching lights off every whip stitch. Taking things off standby and saying things like, what do you mean it's cold? Just put another jumper on. When the Arga's on, because it's on all the time, I'm not allowed to use the toaster. So we have the Arga toaster. Here it is. Yes, medieval cooking at its best. So in that goes to the hot plate. And I'm going to start to wait for that to crisp up. Using the toaster on the Arga is always a joy, because sometimes it will take forever and other times it's burnt in the space of about 30 seconds. So I'm just going to keep an eye on that. Again, keeping an eye on those eggs, which are starting to look pretty good. If you wanted to make this more of a substantial supper dish alongside with the toasted sourdough, which is really lovely just to mop up all the juices, you could pop some steamed new potatoes, or you could do fondant potatoes where you put them in a casserole with a bit of butter and oil at the bottom, put the lid on, put them on the hob or in the oven, and take them out every 10-15 minutes or so, shake them round, and they will steam in the buttery juice. That's also very nice. You could, of course, have patatas bravas if you wanted with this, and a lovely big green leafy salad would also go really well to cut through the richness of the tomato sauce and the eggs, which are coming in here. So far, it's now 20 to 12. So I've had around about 14 minutes-ish. Can't remember exactly when I started. And we're not far off this being done. I'm just going to check my toast. There we go. So that's now just gone on to the other side. I can hear that the eggs are bubbling away nicely. That lovely waft of slightly burnt sourdough. Can't beat it. There we go, just close that off. And just again, whilst I'm waiting for this to finish off, fellow gardeners, you know, this time of year, it's really difficult to get any kind of fresh stuff going on from the garden because it's just too cold. Micro herbs are your friend. If you are having gardening withdrawal, then basically have a think about doing some of these microgreens. I got this little kit for Christmas. Microgreens, basically, folks, this is just posh egg and cress. Remember those when you were little? Those eggshells that I just put in the compost bin. You could wash that out, put a bit of kitchen towel in, and grow cress heads. That's all this is. It's some fresh cress. But if you are having your gardening withdrawal, that's quite nice. You don't need to have a fancy kit. As I say, it was given to me for Christmas. There we go. So lovely golden toasted bread, which I'm just wrangling out of toaster. There we go. Put that back on the top. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to prop that off the side of my chopping board. The reason I'm doing that is if I left it flat on the chopping board, it's going to start to steam and the bread's going to go soggy. Whereas if I just tip it up so that the air's all around it, as it starts to cool down, it's going to crisp up that little bit more. It's still nice and spongy in the middle, but you're going to get that nice crunchy texture from the sourdough if you let it dry off before you start to use it. Okay, so they're just going to take a moment or two more. That's always the case, isn't it? When you're doing it live, is you're thinking, come on, anytime you want to cook would be good. So the Spanish flavors in here come from the red peppers, come from the chorizo, and come from some of the spices. You can add more paprika to it should you want to. You can also, if you like, go a little bit off-piste. You could add fresh coriander. You could add some spinach to it. If you wanted to bulk it out as a vegetarian main dish, there are lots of different ways you can use this recipe as a starting point. One of the things that I like to do with it is when it's ready, which hopefully will be in a couple of minutes, is to then serve it as it's just coming down to room temperature, mostly because that tomato sauce is like the surface of the sun when it comes straight off the top of the Aga. So I may, in a minute, depending on what this looks like, open up for some questions whilst we just wait for the eggs to set. Let me just have another look. Not far off, but yeah, I think if you've got any questions at this point, throw them at me now whilst I've got a couple of minutes waiting for these eggs to set. Anybody out there? Have I been talking?
Sheena,
Hi,
Sheena,
Christina.
It reminds me of a dish I did on Zoom once not long ago, but is it like such? It's called shakshuka.
It's, yeah.
Is it like that?
Yeah.
It's very.
It's very similar. The spices and the flavorings are just that bit different. And I think
because I think this is Moroccan or something, isn't it?
It's shakshuka, yes.
I'm not sure actually.
Turkish, I think, it's got chili in it, chili pepper. That chili pepper that's got the odd name. Pul biber, the sweet chili flakes rather than the hot ones. And I think it's got sort of a couple of things like cumin and turmeric.
Yes, exactly.
Like that.
Yes, but it's very similar idea, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And it's a really good point in that by thinking about the basis of how the recipe is put together, if you don't like chorizo, paprika, etc., then use spices that you do like.
Exactly.
You know, it would work really well, actually, similar idea with lentils and Indian spicing, almost like dal with egg on the top would be quite nice as well, if that's your thing. Yeah,
it was delicious anyway.
There we go. Hooray! So I've taken the lid off, as you can see. I'm going to pop that over there. And I'm going to bring this up onto the board so you can see it a little bit better. So you can see that the egg whites have now set. If I just tip this a little bit, as the pan's roasting, you can see the egg whites have now set. Now, the reason I've taken this off the heat now, even though you can see those eggs are still really quite wobbly, is I'm going to leave the lid back on to let these come down a little bit to room temperature. Then what I would do is to sprinkle the cress on the top. If I do that now, it's just going to wilt away to nothing because it's just these little microgreens. They don't have any substance. They'll just disappear. And then what you do when it's ready to serve is basically, it depends on how posh you're feeling. You can eat it straight out of the pan. Straight out of the pan, just using your lovely, gorgeous toasted sourdough, which you can rub with a cut clove of garlic, put on a little bit of oil, and basically spoon it straight out of the pan onto your bread, and then use it to dip into the eggs. Or of course you could take it out onto plates if you were planning to serve it with, you know, a few more bits and bobs. This will stand in a lidded pan. You just see the heat coming off it there for a good 15 to 20 minutes to bring that down to room temperature, which is just as well, isn't it? Because as I come to the end of my foresight, we've got around about half an hour before I finish the meeting and we can come back and eat it. So there you go. In just under 25 minutes, Spanish style eggs from my kitchen for my Spanish friend, Adela. There you go.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Sheena. Only one thing that I will say is at the beginning you turned around and said that you could have it for vegetarians by leaving out the chorizo. Absolutely. You also said obviously don't use the butter and use the oil, and you could make it vegan. Unfortunately you can't because eggs aren't vegan, but just a little thing, just putting that out there. But it is you can definitely have it for if you've got any lactose intolerance. That's an amazing meal to have because it doesn't have anything in it. So but now it is a commercial break time.